Welcome, students, to Lecture 11 of our series. I am Dr. Jabbar Al-Maliki, representing the School of Computing at University Utara, Malaysia. Today, we are analyzing the mechanics of managing a secure network. When you bring an enterprise network online, you drop it into a hostile environment. Dynamic threats probe external perimeters looking for a fracture. A common operational failure is treating network security as a static installation, a firewall you configure once and forget. In reality, security is an ongoing, active lifecycle. It demands continuous monitoring, testing, and improvement to stay ahead of evolving attack vectors. To maintain that lifecycle, engineers must master two distinct competencies. The first is offensive network testing, which systematically hunts down and exploits technical flaws within your own systems. The second is defensive security policy. You need formal governance to control how the physical systems operate and, crucially, how the human users interact with them. True network resilience is built by deploying both. You must execute tactical offense to find your weaknesses and implement strategic governance to ensure those weaknesses are permanently corrected. We start with network security testing. This is the process of actively evaluating a network's posture to expose vulnerabilities before a malicious actor discovers them. We can map these concepts using a security management matrix. The left column organizes our evaluation methodologies. The first tier is vulnerability assessment. This relies heavily on automated scanning tools designed to rapidly identify known, documented weaknesses across the network. The second tier is penetration testing. Instead of relying solely on automated diagnostics, a pen test is manual. An engineer actively simulates real-world attacks to see if they can exploit the vulnerabilities found during the assessment phase. The third tier is security auditing. This shifts the focus from exploitation to verification, rigorously reviewing system configurations to ensure they meet required compliance standards. Together, these three methodologies fall under the broader umbrella of ethical hacking, the authorized attempt to defeat system defenses. But locating a technical flaw is only a diagnostic step. Pointing out an unpatched server does not address the operational failure that left the server unpatched in the first place. Before an engineer executes these tests, they must define their starting parameters based on information asymmetry, specifically how much architectural knowledge they have of the target. Black box testing simulates an external threat. The engineer starts with zero prior knowledge of the target system, forcing them to map the network blindly from the outside in. White box testing sits at the opposite extreme. The engineer operates with full, comprehensive knowledge of the architecture and source code, simulating an insider threat or developer auditing their own work. Gray box testing strikes a middle ground. The engineer has partial visibility, often simulating the perspective of a legitimate internal user whose account has been compromised by an attacker. To execute these tests, network engineers rely on a specific tactical toolkit. They deploy Nmap for raw network scanning. It interrogates IP addresses to discover active hosts, open ports, and the underlying topology of the target environment. They use Wireshark for packet capture. It intercepts live traffic, allowing engineers to drill down into individual data packets and analyze protocol behavior at a microscopic level. And they utilize Metasploit as the actual execution framework. Once a vulnerability is found, Metasploit delivers the payload required to actively penetrate the system. These command line tools generate raw, actionable diagnostic data. That data must then be handed off to the enterprise management team so the structural flaws can be corrected. That handoff brings us to the governance domain. Raw offensive data requires formal defensive rules to be actionable across an organization. We establish these rules through a comprehensive security policy, a formal set of mandates that dictate exactly how an organization protects its information systems.
Returning to our matrix, we map the 5 core administrative components that make up this policy framework. First is the access control policy. This strictly defines authorization levels, determining exactly which users have permission to access specific internal resources. Second is the acceptable use policy, or AUP. This governs human behavior, outlining the permitted and restricted actions for users operating on company hardware. Third is the incident response policy. When a live breach occurs, this policy triggers predefined emergency protocols to contain the threat. Fourth is the data protection policy. It mandates the specific encryption and storage mechanisms required to maintain data confidentiality and integrity. Finally, the backup and recovery policy. This dictates the disaster survival procedures, ensuring compromised or destroyed data can be restored from secure, isolated copies. Taken together, these 5 policies form the administrative firewall of an organization. They dictate the behavior of the underlying hardware and constrain the humans interacting with it. These policies cannot be drafted arbitrarily. Building them requires a structured development lifecycle, starting with a granular assessment of the specific risks facing the organization. Methodical. The operation follows a precise sequence. Identify the requirements. Assess the vulnerabilities. Define the security objectives. Document the roles. Implement the enforcement. And crucially, schedule regular reviews to update the mandates as threats evolve. To guarantee rigor, these internal documents must align with established international benchmarks, most notably the ISO 27001 standards for information security management. But an aligned policy is useless if no one follows it. Enforcement relies entirely on keeping the rules clear and executing persistent, regular employee training. An enterprise security policy is merely ink on paper. It only works when the engineering team transforms it into an active culture of continuous compliance. Let's apply this matrix to real-world computing contexts to see how the collision of testing tools and governance policies determines organizational survival. By tracking threat events on a timeline, we can map how offensive inputs from above and defensive policies from below intersect to shape the outcome. In our first case, a major banking institution relies on continuous penetration testing cycles. By aggressively hacking their own online portals from the top down, they locate and patch a critical vulnerability before an external threat actor can exploit it. Conversely, consider an organization hit by a massive internal data breach. The failure here wasn't a complex software flaw, it was a failure of governance. A structurally weak access control policy allowed a compromised account to freely navigate sensitive databases without restriction. Now, visualize a ransomware attack systematically locking down a digital grid. Suddenly, the encryption wave is halted, flushed from the system, and the grid resets. This third company survives a direct ransomware hit without paying a cent. Their immediate survival is dictated strictly by a rigorously executed incident response protocol, combined with an isolated backup and recovery policy that restores their data instantly. The practical takeaways are clear. Offensive testing identifies the vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Defensive policies provide the structured guidelines required to secure the environment. Management is not a finish line. It's a continuous, closed loop of updates, testing, and monitoring. And despite every technological advancement deployed to protect a network, human awareness and behavior remain the most critical variables in the equation. On behalf of University Utara, Malaysia, thank you for joining Lecture 11. True enterprise resilience demands both the aggressive curiosity of a hacker and the disciplined governance of an architect. Maintain both, and you maintain the network.